Tom, Doug, thank you very much for joining me today. Tom, your work, a hallmark of it is its reality, it's close to the truth, always on the cutting edge of the political scene. You two have chosen China for SSN as one of the principal protagonist. Do you see China as a threat to the stability of the world today?
Well, China is a country that doesn't really know what it wants to be. On one hand, they're trying to develop a free market economy and give their citizens economic freedom. And on the other hand, we have Tiananmen Square, where they decided that they could have economic freedom but not have political freedom, which is a considerable imbalance. Moreover, in this particular case, with the Spratly Islands, there appear to be considerable deposits of oil there. And you'll recall, 14 years ago, that was the reason Argentina went after the Falkland Islands, the thought that there might be oil there that they could exploit, even though Argentina is currently self-sufficient in oil. Mm. A war of aggression is really nothing much more than a large-scale armed robbery. And is the scenario plausible? I think it's quite plausible, because nations are greedy, right, particularly Marxist nations. Mm-hmm.
Doug, you served out in the Far East as a submariner. Do you buy that? Was that part of the wargaming that went on when you were out there, the potential threat posed by China?
No, I mean, I was out there in the mid-60s, and that was in the time of the Indonesian confrontation. I mean, we didn't really think too much about China in those days. Right.
But you buy the general scenario of seeing China becoming a bigger player on the scene?
Oh, very much so, and I think this is an extremely good plot for the game.
Yes. Tom, you talked briefly about the Spratlys. Tell me a bit more about them. We've read a lot about them. There are many nations that claim them. China has landed ships on them, I think, and so have other countries. What is exactly the status of those islands?
Well, the Spratly Islands are kind of like a dead grandfather with a heck of a big estate, and everybody wants to claim to be the #1 heir. In fact, I should think that China's territorial claim to the Spratlys is fictitious.
Tenuous at best.
Oh, given their location. But they're such inhospitable pieces of real estate that whoever can get there, plant a flag and defend it is going to own them.
And you think in this scenario where China is an aggressor because of political instability internally, do you think that might be a realistic driver in the near future?
Well, historically, a nation with internal problems will externalize. Nothing draws a country together like an external threat or a perceived external threat. It's just a classical method historically to unite a country.
Doug, your experiences in submarines, this is a story about submarines. We're in a post-Cold War world now. We devoted a great deal of energy to dealing with the potential threat from the Soviet submarine fleet. This is a different environment. What do you think is the strategic and tactical role of submarines in the post-Cold War world?
It ranges right across the spectrum, starting obviously with the major strategic use of a submarine, which is to launch intercontinental ballistic missiles. But in this situation, a submarine can be used strategically to, in the term poise, off an enemy area. Its existence is made known. And we had a very good example of that in the 70s when Argentina was making noises about the Falklands. And we dispatched an SSN down there, told them it was there, and that put off the business for a few years.
But in that particular situation, Argentina had no counter force to combat that. They weren't capable really of dealing with the submarines that we had. That's not the case with China, where they have a pretty extensive anti-submarine warfare capability.
Well, they have an anti-submarine warfare capability. Whether I don't think you can put it in the same league as the anti-submarine capability of NATO nations or indeed of the former Soviet Union. So for the game and for reality, the technical superiority of the US submarine force far outweighs the capability that China on its own today could put against them.
In other words, the submarines that the Americans can field are quieter, faster than the capability of the Chinese to listen to them with their sonars and other...
Yes, at this stage, but I mean, the world always moves on. But I think for the scenario that we're looking at here, which is cast in today's technological climate, yeah, the American submarines would have a pretty good time against the ASW forces.
Right. Do you think, Tom, that the Chinese Navy would have any realistic chance against the United States? There's a huge technological gap between the two. They have a lot of numbers, but not much capability.
One of the things you have to remember about combat is it's not really a technical exercise. It's a human exercise and a psychological exercise. And it's not machine against machine. It's person against person. And we all too often overlook that. The difference between a good Navy and a bad Navy is the quality and the training of its personnel. You know, better to have good men in bad ships than bad men in good ships. If the Chinese decide to make a national goal and of course they don't have a Navy, it's the naval branch of the People's Liberation Army, to upgrade their Navy and and really invest some time and money into it to develop the capabilities they need, they could indeed be quite formidable. China does have a maritime history that we all too often forget.
But they've been trying to upgrade land, sea and air for some years now. They've invested a lot of money and a lot of people, but they've not been able to bridge that technological gap between the United States and the NATO forces and what they currently have. They have a lot of things, but can they do that training and technology and bring it together to make it effective, do you
The
think?
fundamental strength of any country, the fundamental power base of any country is its economy. China has a very rapidly growing economy. They're making computers. They're making all manner of products which can be sold worldwide. If they can do that, they can make damn near anything.
So do you think that today we treat China with kid gloves that are perhaps inappropriate? Do you see them as a threat, as some people would argue, for the stability of the world?
I don't know that I go quite that far. Probably the country at greatest risk from Chinese aggression would be Russia, the former Soviet Union. Do we treat China in a way which causes me difficulty? Yes. When Deng Xiaoping stomped on the demonstrators in Tiananmen Square, we should have done something. For two reasons. First of all, America should not do business with countries that do such things to its own citizens. Moreover, and this is something frequently overlooked, that act was deliberately taken in the knowledge that Bernie Shaw and CNN were filming it. We're sending it out live at the time on global television. Were they indeed, therefore, telling the world, drop dead? This is the way we do business, and if you don't like it, that's too bad. I question the ethics of doing business as usual with a country that is so grossly repressive as the People's Republic of China.
Doug, in SSN we have a very realistic portrayal of what it's like to be in command of a nuclear submarine, something that you have done. Can you tell me a bit about what sort of training goes in to make a commander? What it is that is looked for in psychologically and in practical terms in somebody who can deliver?
Well, first of all, if I can talk about the game for a moment, I mean, the game is designed to put the player outside the submarine, if you like, as a sort of being, to envisage the tactical situation around him in his mind's eye, and to have a pictorial representation of that. And that is where the game is unique. Nothing like that before. As for what makes a good submarine commander, well, that is really almost impossible to quantify properly.
You go on a course in England called the Perisher course.
Oh yes, you do. Yeah, I mean,
so what do they make you do in that?
Well, first of all, I mean, there's a big weeding out process well before that point. Lots of people want to be submariners, and they get there and they find they don't like the way of life. They don't like the hours they have to keep. Claustrophobia is something I've only experienced once. One member of a submarine who suffered from claustrophobia. But in the main they don't. I mean, because human beings are very adaptable. So by the time what we call in the Royal Navy, the submarine perisher comes along, the person is well imbued into submarines. It's a question then of whether they've got the stamina, the mental acuity, a particular ability to remember a tactical picture, having glanced at it very briefly, and then throw the submarine around, manoeuvring all over the place, and then still know where the various components of that tactical picture are. And that is some kind of spatial awareness. And we didn't have that term when I did the course, but that's now what they use. Which
is very similar to the effect in SSN, because you're having to simulate essentially what the spatial
Yeah.
picture looks like.
Yeah, and the player has got to be able to assimilate
Right.
information coming in, not as thick and fast as it does on a real submarine, but reasonably realistic. And if he doesn't assimilate the information, put things in the right priority order, and tackle them in a sensible way, then he will get caught.
Tom, Doug is a good friend of yours and has been for a number of years. You also know a number of American equivalents to Doug. What's the difference, would you say, between a British and American?
I've gotten into a lot of trouble on this.
You could get in trouble here.
I've been especially propagandized by Doug and a few of his partners in crime in the Royal Navy that I once published an article suggesting that the Royal Navy trained its submarine skippers better than the U.S. Navy did, which earned me the undying wrath of a certain senior officer in the United States Navy. You can argue long and hard about the difference between having a specialist and a generalist. Generally speaking, I think the Royal Navy has a way of bringing its officers, or identifying its stars, beating the hell out of them, and to winnow them out and pick the absolute best of that group to command, and to award command at a much younger age than we do in the U.S. Navy. I think that's a fundamentally healthy thing.
So would you say that implies that the British commanders tend to be younger, more aggressive, have more initiative, or is it that it comes out in a different way?
It's well within the range of personal variances. You know, we have good ones, they have good ones, we have bad ones, they have bad ones. Generally speaking, I'd say that their method for advancing their prospective commanding officers is somewhat better than ours.
Do you agree with that, Dave?
Yes, I do. I'm not so sure about the we have bad ones, but I'll let Tom get away with that. But the net result there's undoubtedly the fact, go back to something Tom said earlier, a lot of the technical capability of the US submarines is of higher quality than ours. But somehow or other we managed to achieve the same sort of results, and the two navies work very closely together, particularly on the submarine front.
Right. And what about the Chinese? What do we know about how the Chinese train and perform in their navies? Do we have any sense of that, really?
Well, it's a communist country, which does not, the communists do not reward personal initiative, except by execution.
Right.
Now, communist China, you have the odd situation where they're trying to develop a free market economy without political freedom, and that's ultimately going to fail, because that doesn't work. But until such time as that happens, we do face a potential adversary. Now, given the fact that they do have the industrial capability to produce just about anything they want, and of high enough quality, if they can sell television sets throughout the world, then they can build a nuclear submarine. It's just a matter of quality control. And if they want the oil in the Spratly Islands all that badly, which they probably do, then it's simply a matter of establishing a national priority. We must make a navy which is competitive with the rest of the world. And if they decide to do that, they can.
Right.
Historically, Kaiser Wilhelm II decided to make a navy, which was quite competitive with the Royal Navy. And they did it in what, one generation?
Of course, the former Soviet Union had to go through the same transformation in the 60s after the Cuban Missile Crisis, when they decided that they certainly needed to build up a blue water navy, and they did that.
Right.
It took them probably 10, 15 years before they got they got the equipment, but before they could use it to a reasonable standard.
Yes, and they developed a very effective submarine fleet, and one of the points of this game is that we have Russia passing on some equipment to the Chinese. Do you think that's realistic? Will they sell their soul? I mean, the submarine fleet in Russia is the only thing that's left, really, of their navy that's effective.
Well, they've sold submarines to other parts of the world.
Most of them, though, have been pretty low-grade, old-fashioned things, right?
Well, they've sold nuclear
Iran
submarines to India, and they are still, whether they're potential adversaries or not, I mean, there are still links there, clearly. I mean, Tom would know more about that than me.
Well,
but
it's a political and economic question.
It's a political and economic question,
And the Russians are so strapped now for hard currency that they, make them the right kind of an offer, they'll probably deliver.
And the Chinese have enough hard currency by comparison.
We've got a trade imbalance with China that would buy half the Soviet Navy.
Right. In the same way, the game supposes that a takeover of the Spratly Islands is the beginning of a move on Taiwan. We saw the exercises off Taiwan recently, which looked very intimidating. Do you think that remains a mainland China ambition?
It could be. Again, the Falkland Islands War of 1982 is an interesting historical model. Why did that happen? Because the military junta that ruled Argentina at the time was making such a botch of running their nation that they had to find something to distract their people from the screw-up they had at home. And they did that by grabbing the Falklands and causing a particularly pointless little war. In the case of the People's Republic of China, one way to distract their people from their political difficulties at home is to externalize. One target is Hong Kong. They're going to absorb Hong Kong very shortly. And if they can absorb Taiwan, they have an enormously powerful economy. And also, they put paid on a long-standing bill with Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang. And you know, the Chinese are people with long memories.
But this would not be without cost. It would be difficult to imagine the United States sitting by and saying, okay guys, take it over.
This is unknown. It is a fact of U.S. law that America has a particularly schizophrenic policy toward China. On one hand, we acknowledge that there is only one China. And yet on the other hand, we say this is true, but if the PRC attacks Taiwan, we're not going to like it very much. Now those two statements of policy are incompatible, but it is standing U.S. law.
I think the world should watch very carefully what the Chinese military does now. I mean, they did their exercises off Taiwan. They had a sort of face down, climb down. Be interesting to see how they respond to that, and whether they feel they've got to pour more money or focus more money in certain areas to ensure that it never happens again.
Further complication, what's the nearest U.S. Navy base? We don't have Subic Bay in the Philippines anymore.
Right.
We have to stage out of, the nearest one we have, I guess, is Japan. And that's a goodly distance.
Yes, and
The
would
next
Japan
nearest
really
is-
want that either if China was rattling sabers?
Good question.
Well, we're not terribly keen on nuclears.
No, and the next nearest fleet base is Pearl Harbor, and that's 3,000 miles.
Give me a sense of what it's like inside a submarine in a crisis. You're under attack, you don't quite know where the enemy is, you've got to find them, retaliate, and at the same time take evasive action. What's the flavor of that like? What's the smell, the taste of the drama?
Well, first of all, I mean, I must get it across to everybody, and I think the player needs to get that as well, is professionalism. People remain reasonably cool and calm. They have to do their job, because we're all everybody's depending on everybody else.
It didn't look like that in Crimson Tide, of course.
Well, yeah. Well, I thought Crimson Tide was a great movie till about halfway through.
Until the
that wasn't
mutiny
made
started.
by Paramount.
Yeah.
But yeah, having said that, you train for it all the time, and therefore it almost, second nature is probably putting it too far, but it's a smooth engine that's running, and a little perturbation like an attack and so on just notches it up a different gear, and people respond to that. I've never experienced sort of hysteria or people jumping up and down. I mean, they just get on and do the job.
What was your worst experience as a submariner?
I think the worst experience is when I had water coming in when it shouldn't have been coming in, when I was pretty close to my maximum diving depth. But that was handled very nicely.
And what did you do?
Well, we were in a place where we could surface, and so we surfaced in emergency. And actually, I was very impressed by the way people responded. They did all the right things in the right order at the right time.
And has that always been your experience? There hasn't been occasions where people have said or done things that take it outside of the normal performance loop?
If the submarine is taken outside of normal performance loop, the captain will do that, and do it very advisedly, because he knows the risks he's running. But there are times, tactical scenarios, when you will need to do that. And if you're a professional and you know the capabilities and the limitations, not only of your kit and your crew, but of yourself, which is the most important one, then you can do it and get away with it.
In part of the game, the commander of the submarine Cheyenne is instructed to fire only if fired upon.
Mhm.
That seems to me to be a very vulnerable position to be put in, because you're placed not in a proactive position but in a reactive one, which is not a happy state to be in.
You don't want to have a Navy commander initiating war between two superpowers. That's 17th and 18th century stuff.
But do you also want to allow yourself to be in a position where you get taken out?
That's a political decision. In America, the military is controlled by civilians.
Well, so it is elsewhere. But to answer Jane's question, when you go to sea on a submarine, I never served in an SSBN or a boomer, as the Americans would know it, but in an SSN, you go to sea on a semi-war footing. So you've got torpedoes loaded. You are in the, particularly if you're doing some interesting operations, and then you are in the situation you've just described. That you could find somebody taking
Firing
umbrage at
upon
what
you
you're
at any
doing,
moment, yeah.
but you can't go out and do things, because military don't they don't make war; they conduct a war which is made by other people.
A fine distinction. What, in your experience on submarines, which is also quite
All tied alongside, with one exception. Yeah.
what was the exception?
I stepped off a tugboat onto the portside fairwater plane of USS Hammerhead, walked across, climbed up into the sail so Newsweek could take some photographs of me being a fool.
And you weren't seasick?
Not in the least.
No,
I was
right.
too scared to be seasick. There was about that much water between the pressure hull of the submarine and the tugboat. I figured I was on a real thinning program if I fell off.
In one of the missions, we meet the Akula submarine for the first time. And we've already met the Han class. Describe for me, Tom, a bit of the distinctions between the two, the capabilities.
Like there was a Model T Ford and a current day Ferrari. The Akula is a very formidable platform. Toward the end of the life of the Soviet Union, they actually they started to understand what navies were all about.
With the help of...
fellow John Walker, yeah, he was very helpful to them in some ways. Fortunately, one of the other things they found, it's awfully expensive to do it right. But the Akula is the rough equivalent of a late 637 class or an early 688 class. I mean, you can say that the Akula may be, 15 years behind current technology, but that's only a few percentage points of performance.
But it's a major step change improvement in capability. I mean, in my early days in submarines, one could go out to sea in the Atlantic, hang around for a bit, and you're bound to find a Russian submarine. And you knew that he wasn't going to be able to find you. And now the situation is now much more mind-focusing, that you can't go out and just crash around and expect to always have a tremendous sonar advantage over him.
Right. It seems to have been the case, Tom, that since the end of the Cold War, the Russians have been organizing a pretty severe change in the way they make up their submarine fleets, getting rid of the old ones, keeping up the new ones, refining the crews so that they're better trained, better organized, and investing in new submarines. Do you think that's right? I mean, how does that capability stack up these days?
I've yet to figure out exactly what the Russians are thinking about in terms of defense policy. Historically, they're a continental power, not a maritime power. And the biggest national security threat they face is probably China. Now, there are people in Moscow who still worry about the Germans, but I guess it's because they've been reading recent history. They do not face a maritime threat per se, which makes me wonder why the hell they continue to build some ships. Retiring the old ships, it was just to save money, and they had no real tactical utility. Yes, they do seem to be continuing construction on the Akula, the advanced Akula class, but I really don't know why.
Well, I still think that they're they're looking to the west. I mean, you say they don't have an immediate maritime threat, but the U.S. has got the biggest navy in the world, and that in being is a threat. Go back to Jutland, fleet in being is a threat.
But why do you think they've been putting the Akulas off the east and west coast of the United States in the last year or so, successfully, I believe? Some of them, we think, undetected. I mean, that shows, first of all, an aggression that we haven't seen before. Second, an ability that we haven't seen before. And third, a worrying potential gap between American capability vis-a-vis Russian capability? I mean, do you think that's...
Well, you've made 3 points there. The aggression we haven't seen before, yes we have, because they've always wanted to go into the Atlantic and roam at will and show their capability so doing. They couldn't do it. Now they can,
Right.
to an extent. It's always impossible to say what sort of detection capability the NATO forces or the US special equipment has got, because you don't quite know what you're missing and what you have detected. But there is no doubt that they have been doing what you say and getting away with it. And that does a number of things, doesn't it? It gives them a considerable amount of confidence. It worries the Western powers, and it goes back to their political leadership and say, well, we can do something if we want to. So I think they will continue to do that. Whereas whether they've got a proper maritime policy since Gorshkov died is another question. And I would agree with Tom that it could do with a re-evaluation by them.
Do you think that's right, Tom? Do you think that analysis of why they're doing this apparent new aggression against the United States with their submarine?
Well, aggression's the wrong word. I mean, the sea is free for the passage of all, and we fought a war over that once. They've got some toys. They probably want to play with them. And in realistic terms, I don't really think it goes far beyond that. They've got the platforms. They want to see if they work. To me, and from conversations I've had with people who've talked with the Soviet, what they used to call Stavka, I don't know what they call it now, the Soviet Military High Command, they're the two big enemies they see in their future are Germany and the People's Republic of China. Germany, I think they're just out of their minds, but the Russians have a long history of paranoia. In the case of China, we need to remember that the Chinese have been as far west as Novgorod, which is almost on the Baltic. So there is a historical concern there that they have, particularly since China has a growing economy and needs natural resources, and the Soviets in eastern Siberia have the world's largest unexplored mineralogical treasure house.
Yeah. Later in the game, we meet a new class of submarine called the Mao, which is based on another Russian development, the Severodvinsk class. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, it's a new boat. As I said earlier, we can anticipate the Chinese have highly sophisticated industrial capability now, and if they choose to build something that good, they can probably do it. Again, back in World War I, the Germans built a fleet from scratch, and by 1916 they had ships every bit as good as what the Royal Navy was fielding, with hundreds of years of tradition. It's simply a matter of political will and industrial expertise. They have the industrial expertise, and if they develop the political will, it's going to happen.
We, in part of the game, we in the Cheyenne experience being attacked with sonar buoys extensively. Can you describe for me, you must have gone through that yourself, can you describe to me how that works and what it feels like?
Well, yes, you don't really get attacked by a sonar buoy.
No. Threatened by it,
threatened by a sonar buoy. Sonar buoys tend to be dropped from either maritime patrol aircraft or helicopters, and they have a limited detection capability, but years and years of research has gone into the sort of pattern which they lay in the water, and they do have a certain capability to detect. You occasionally in a submarine can hear a sort of plopping noise as something's dropped into the water. But in the main, you do not know whether there are sonar buoys there or not.
So it's passive, it just sits there.
They are
the noise
predominantly used passively.
Yeah.
There are active capabilities in these sonar buoys. Now, if somebody goes active on a sonar buoy close to you, then that probably means either they've seen you because you've been up to periscope depth and they've seen your periscope, or they've got a passive detection on you and they're trying to localize you for a weapon attack.
Right.
So one wouldn't hang around very long.
Or he's trying to spook you.
Or he's trying to spook you, but I mean, then you're getting into the do I, don't I.
But what happens when you hear the ping of an active buoy and you know a weapon is about to go into the water, or you feel that's going to happen? What do you do? Do you take immediate evasive action? What what shape does that take?
There is no clear answer. If there were a clear answer to what to do in that situation, then people wouldn't try and fire torpedoes because they would never work. You just have to, as you do in the game, sit back and take a global view of the tactical scenario you're in. Sometimes, yes, you would drop countermeasures, speed up, change depth, and basically disappear as quickly as possible. Other times you might lie doggo. Other times you might fire a torpedo on another bearing if you think that it's not a sonar buoy, it's another submarine that's spooking you, because you will certainly spook him if you do that. So there is no clear-cut answer. So the captain of the submarine has to have all these thoughts in his mind all the time.
What's the environment in the South China Sea like? How does that impact on the sort of decision-making you'd have to take in a submarine like the Cheyenne? I mean, what are the particular aspects of the South China Sea?
Well, it's certainly shallow in parts. It'd be pretty noisy with a lot of background noise. It's a busy shipping area.
Which helps you in
A lot of
It
money
helps,
traffic.
and it helps and it hinders. Yes, I mean it helps if you're trying to sneak in and do something. If you're desperately searching for an elusive target like an Akula, it's not necessarily such a great help.
Right.
But there's nothing unique about operations in the South China Sea, really.
This is an odd case of modesty on Doug's part, that he knows more about oceanography than some PhD oceanographers. You have to, because a submariner uses the environment as a weapon and with considerable skill. And you spent, 15 years learning that?
No, 20 now. Yeah.
Yeah, which leads on neatly into the distinctions between reality and fiction. You, Tom, as we said earlier on, may try and blur the
James,
two.
there's the difference between reality and fiction is fiction has to make sense. You want to keep that in mind.
But you, how did you find dealing with this game as opposed to writing novels?
Well, the point of a game is that you set up a set of circumstances which then the user, the game player, defines himself. So essentially, we're building an intellectual playground and letting somebody else play in it and determine what happens there, which is sort of the magic of this if you do it right.
But a lot of the books, I think I'm right in saying that you war game, you work it through in a similar kind of a way, although not with a similar result, obviously, because they're different media. Is that right? I mean, you've got a lot of experience of wargaming, I think.
Well, it's kind of like owning a casino and loading the dice. I pretty much determine the way I want the story to turn out. A game, in some ways, is more intellectually honest, because in my books, I determine what all the players do.
Right.
In a game, either the artificial intelligence on the CD-ROM or another player determines what the other guy does, and it's in that sense, it's much more realistic.
Yes. And how did you deal with that? I mean, it was a new medium for you. You were bringing a great wealth of your experience to the game to try and create as much reality as possible. Where did reality meet the reality of fiction, if you like?
I think first thing that nobody should be under any misconception that this is a sort of submarine attack simulator. It certainly is not that. What it is trying to do is to make a player realize a good percentage of the sort of information and actions one would take when driving an SSN. So let me take a scenario. If you're honing in on a contact which has been detected by other means, it could take you 3 days of stealthily going around the ocean. Then you get a sniff of a contact, you close it a bit further, get another sniff, then get into a firing position. Can take days, weeks. Now clearly that's not something we could do in the computer game because they'd all be asleep. And so the compromise between total reality and the reality of the game player is something that we've debated at length with experts in the marketing side, with us, and amongst those of us who enjoy the game for the game's sake, and reach a compromise which we believe is going to meet the expectations.
But the timing issue, was that the most significant compromise of the time compression, or was the other areas where you felt, well, okay, in the balance of things, reality has to go here and we'll create this because it'll create the same sort of atmosphere, if not the exact thing.
Well, timing was by far the biggest, but there are a host of other compromises that have been made as well. But they're not particularly big, but if somebody who's done the same sort of job as me plays the game, he should play it in the knowledge that this is a game to entertain rather than to teach.
But more accurate entertainment perhaps than Crimson Tide, you would say.
Yes, much more so.
Right.
But it will not enable the game player at the end of 15 successful missions to go and take command of a Los Angeles class
Well,
submarine.
if it were that easy, I'm sure that many others would have been summoned to the flag.
Well, maybe a Los Angeles, but not a Trafalgar, right?
Well, we're going to get national about this. But if the player gets it wrong, he will be killed, or he will be attacked anyway, if he's then skillful enough to escape. There's a learning process throughout. So it starts with very simple scenarios, building up to a crescendo. So by the end of the game, the player will know quite a bit about handling a submarine underwater.
And what compromises, do you agree with that analysis? I mean, that was a...
Oh, on that I have to defer to Doug. I mean, I've never done it for a living. He has. You know, I write about it, but just because I can spell the acronyms doesn't mean I can drive the boats. You know, he spent 20 years learning how to do the things I write about in a few months. So I'm the minstrel in this case, and he's the expert.
Doug, when we see in the game that there is an attack on a carrier battle group, there is infiltration by enemy boats, there is the danger of friendly fire, how real is that?
Very.
It is?
One of the more dangerous scenarios, and I hope no submariners will take offense at that, is mixing it like that, when you've got surface forces, aircraft, submarines, all in the same part of the ocean, with enemy submarines infiltrating, because there's a temptation to fire at shadows. But I know there are procedures which have been worked on for years to control people into areas which move with the carrier task force. But that requires an awful lot of communications, either underwater communications or satellite type communications. And I've done it a few times. I've never felt entirely comfortable when there's been a known enemy in the vicinity.
Well, those sort of blue-on-blue incidents are all too common on land, where people apparently should be able to see each other.
Well, I mean, war's dangerous, and that sort of thing does happen. You can't expect to.
In World War II, we know at least one, and possibly as many as 3 U.S. submarines were killed blue on blue. And in the one known case, the submarine was in a safe travel zone where nobody was supposed to attack anybody. But a tin can skipper said, "This is it. That's a Japanese submarine." Boom.
We learn in the game that intelligence says there are no enemy around here, and intelligence gets it slightly wrong. What can you rely on? Are you very alone down there? Are you saying it's me against everything?
No, I think that would be over-dramatizing it. But there's no doubt that if one puts implicit faith in the intelligence without kind of questioning mind, then it will end in tears. Intelligence can be reassuring, but as we've been talking earlier about Akula submarines coming out into the Atlantic and not necessarily being detected, or only being detected infrequently, during which time they can move thousands of miles. So intelligence is not the be-all and end-all, and therefore it is another part of the brickwork for running your submarine. That's it.
You have a jaundiced view of intelligence, Tom, I saw you.
It's imperfect. I've yet to meet a tactical or operational commander who really trusts his intelligence sources.
Because they prefer to trust their own judgment on the ground rather than some guy who's somewhere in the
No, but it's nice.
It's
occasionally nice to have. Well, no, not occasionally. It is nice to get intelligence reports, particularly hard intelligence reports, because that can frame your thinking for the next several hours. It's when the English language gets fairly rough treatment by the intelligence service, and you go from probable to possible with an awful lot of connotation, awful lot of variations in the middle. And it is possible after years of reading these things to know how confident they are feeling back at base. But as I said, I would never put total confidence in it.
What do you think a player will come out of this game? Will they come out thinking, God, who wants to be a skipper of a submarine? Will they come out thinking this is a gripping, exciting, intellectually challenging task? What do you think they'll come away with?
Well, first of all, they'll come out with kind of it with a sense of achievement, I hope, if they've got through the 15 scenarios. Secondly, it is not designed to act as a recruiting drive for U.S. Navy submarine service. But I think what the player will come out is with a bit of an understanding of what it's like down there, something which nobody really has tried to portray in the past. I mean, you've mentioned Crimson Tide, we've had a few other movies as well, one that was involved with this chap here. But none of those have really been able to pit the player against a few scenarios where he's had to learn, hopefully by his mistakes, or if he's bright enough to operate the submarine intuitively. So I think that, yeah, they'll come out of it with a much better understanding of what life in a submarine is about.
What do you think, Tom?
I know people who've done submarine and any submarine warfare from from the surface, from underneath, and from the air, and they all agree that it's the best game in town. That there is nothing more intellectually challenging than submarine / anti-submarine warfare. And if the player really pays attention to the game, he'll come out with as realistic a feel for that game as you can get anywhere.
Yeah, excellent. Tom, Doug, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Why are all the lights out? What do you think?
I don't know. I think we'll just quit and go and play some golf. There's not much else to do, is there?
Get a few holes in before the missiles come?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it.
Hello, my name is James Adams. I'm very pleased to welcome you to a special conversation with best-selling author Tom Clancy and former nuclear submarine commander Doug Littlejohns. We will be talking about the political, strategic and tactical implications of SSN, the breakthrough submarine game by Clancy and Littlejohns. Our conversation will be taking place behind these apparently innocent-looking steel doors. They disguise one of the best-kept secrets of the Cold War, codenamed Greek Island and set up by the Eisenhower administration. It was here, in this nuclear bunker, deep beneath the Greenbrier Hotel, in the heart of the West Virginia countryside, that Congress would come to fight the nuclear war. It includes decontamination facilities, dining halls, advanced communication centers, dormitories to house Congress and a support staff for up to 40 days, medical facilities, double fail-safe power plant, and a riot control armory. Huge blast doors were designed to protect the Congress from a nuclear strike from 30 miles away. The veil of secrecy was lifted in 1993, after the end of the Cold War, when the threat of a nuclear attack appeared much less likely. We'll be meeting in Governor's Hall, the auditorium where the House of Representatives would have gathered following a nuclear attack on Washington, D.C.